And I host this reading series every second Wednesday of the month. And you can learn more about At the Inkwell on attheinkwell.com. I created this to help support published authors through book reviews, feature articles, and the monthly reading series here at KGB Bar. And we've been here for a little over 2 years so far. And so tonight I'm very, very pleased to introduce all these lovely writers tonight for memoir night. Okay. First we have Sandy Gertz. Sandy is a writer from Western Pennsylvania, now living in Nashville. And she is the author of The Pattern Maker's Daughter, a poetry collection with Bottom Dog Press. She has published in numerous literary journals, including World Literature Today, where she was named one of 17 noted working-class poets. She reads from her memoir manuscript tonight, Some Girls Have Auras of Bright Colors, which is a really fabulous story, and I hope you all enjoy it. Let's welcome Sandy.
Thank you. Wow, thank you for having me. It's so awesome to be in New York City. I can't remember the last time, and I'm having a blast. I'm reading from Some Girls Have Auras of Bright Colors, and it is a memoir that's kind of a quirky coming of age about a young girl with an atypical seizure disorder. Usually I read from childhood or adolescence or the beginning, but I'm going to read tonight from one of the young adult chapters. And it's always hard to know how to land a plane of the memoir. Where do you end it? It's always a difficult question, and it was for me. And even though as I neared 21 when I grew out of epilepsy, technically, I did notice that it had still plagued me with a lot of bad choices in my youth and young adulthood. And I kind of chronicle the end through a series of bizarre jobs that I had. I didn't go straight to college. I did everything from telephone sales to some pretty crazy things. I got in crazy situations. And this is from a chapter where I was nearly kidnapped with a magazine sales crew, field sales crew. And so here we go. And there is a little compression of time for the reading. It's going to seem like I jump on the sales crew and then I'm trying to get out of it, but it might seem like one day, but it actually is a compression of a week. I'm going to start my time. The next morning I was on a van filled with perhaps 10 toothpaste commercial smiling girls and guys, all full of an eerie sort of enthusiasm that I couldn't quite put my finger on. They were beautiful in a model kind of way, thin and flawless, and I wondered why I was chosen to be included with them. As we drove out on the outer beltways of D.C. and into the depths of suburban Virginia's new construction neighborhoods, one young girl up front spun around in her seat and started into a speech like a cheerleader leading a pep rally. She even clapped. I called her Clearasil Girl because of her cherub skin, though her teeth were just as perfect and her long, shiny hair was impossibly blonde. She chewed gum and popped it endlessly, blowing large bubbles as she spewed words that seemed coded within her somehow. She didn't talk about the sales we would make that day, famished and exhausted, nor the 12 to 15 miles we would walk with little food and water. No, she talked about family, how the people in the van, her brothers and sisters, were her family now. How she didn't have much of one in her old life, wherever they had picked her up along the way, Bonnie Bell lip balm in her backpack, and where they had plucked her from a host of applicants at the last motel cattle call. The Herod organization could be that for us too, she claimed, directing her speech at us newbies in the van. The veterans of Herod, ones who jumped on 4 or 5 cities ago, shared their own stories of redemption, how they became successful just by knocking on doors and having a certain number of them open. The van stopped suddenly and we were nearly pushed out and paired up. The newbies were matched up with a mentor type. I was paired with Chip, though his real name was Alan. No one used their real name, and as I would quickly learn, no one used real stories either. As we set out down the freshly paved and winding roads of the cul-de-sac house plan and rang the first doorbell, Chip turned and gave me a kind of warning. Just follow my lead, he said. As soon as the young housewife opened the crisply painted door, Chip proceeded to change his voice, his stance, gestures, and apparently his age. "Hello, ma'am," he said, all artificially understated and juvenile, his eyes lowered sheepishly toward his legs, which were kicking the porch stoop in a golly shucks kind of way that I was certain no one in their right mind would buy into. "I'm Chip, and this is Susan, my little sister. She and I, well, we're working our way through this school sales contest, and I really want to win so we can get our points and win some prizes. But it's not just for that. We win scholarship points for college. Parents can't afford the cost of putting us through school, you know." And he did some more of the kicking with his feet and lowered his baby blue eyes so that the woman could see his naturally curled dark lashes flutter over his eyelids. "Come in," she said, with a hint of compassion in her voice. "You all ought to come sit and have something cold to drink. It's a heat wave out there." Chip motioned with his hands when the woman wasn't looking for me to play along with his game. I was mortified. Chip was clearly well over 20. He had the facial hair and near beard of a 25-year-old, though I suppose he could pass for as young as 22. But high school? And me, his younger sister? I followed the back of the woman's head as she moved toward the kitchen to fix us iced tea. How could she not see through Chip's outrageous behavior? I stared down at the vacuum marks in the gorgeously clean and soft butter beige carpet. The living room was immaculate, and the knickknacks of angels and saints on the shelves were recently dusted and spotless. The woman came back in and sat down on the couch next to Chip while he continued to spiel that I would soon learn he used to great effect in every household we entered. He started going over all the magazines and what they promised: ladies' health and beauty, men's sports and outdoors, highlights for kids, and more. I kept waiting for the woman with the ivory-soaked complexion to detect the falseness in Alan's voice and show us the door, that she would realize these were magazines she would never likely receive and would call the police while we walked back to our waiting van and on toward the next lonely housewife behind the doorbell. But she didn't. She kept bending over the titles with a look of exquisite curiosity, as though it was perhaps the most interesting thing that had occurred on the block that week, that two figures would knock on the door, one a dangerously handsome young man who she would believe was any age just so she could watch him bat his eyelashes, and one a tolerable young woman who she was kind to but ignored. "You'll want to make the check out to Herod Organization," Chip instructed her, after encouraging the extra years of subscriptions so that it would be nearly guaranteed the woman would never run out of better homes and gardens. I watched astonished as she did exactly as he instructed. It was almost as though the woman took comfort in doing what she was told, as though there was some subliminal message in Chip's odd speech and bizarre story. All I could do was keep shifting my weight uncomfortably on the upholstered chair and wish to be out of that dustless, quiet home and outside in the clear, bright sun, where I could hear the real sounds of cars and lawnmowers and where young adults did not speak like children. Out in the fresh tar smells of the perfect roads where I would flat out ask Alan what the hell was going on. Once the door closed behind us, Alan turned sour, his face pickled and unsmiling. He used his regular voice, and I could feel its coldness. "It's what works. I've been doing this a long time. You need to get better at playing along, and quick." By the end of the morning, Chip had sold over 12 different families' magazine subscriptions, and his clipboard was lined with perfectly smooth checks. By noon, I had walked nearly 6 miles under the beating sun, up and down the hills and streets of the endless neighborhood, which had nearly identical pathways and fingers of roads that led to more circles of pavement. I was famished. When we hoofed it back to the van, we were told we'd be given lunch at a nearby convenience store, but the newbies had to walk. The quota kids, as they were called, the ones who made sales quota on a regular basis, were the ones who had the luxury of being driven. I had visions of a huge sub sandwich, maybe chips, a soda. But once there, I was presented by the Clearasil Queen with tap water in a cup and one hot dog on a slim bun. I sat down on the sidewalk curb and inhaled it in nearly one bite. By the time we reached the hotel at 5 each evening, I wanted only to lie down on the motel beds. There were 2 of us to a bed and 4 in a room, and never get up. Except for the fact of my stomach growling and awaiting supper downstairs, I would have done just that. The newbies and I positioned ourselves in the booths and awaited our allotted food. A skimpy circle of 2 chicken tenders and a few spoonfuls of rice. One of the newbie guys at the table was on the verge of becoming a quota kid. "Once you met quota consistently for 4 weeks, you crossed over," he said. He talked about the exclusive quota parties that were going on down the hall, where they had chips and dip, cookies, and endless soda. As a quota kid, you walked less, were driven more, and you moved up from getting food and board to getting a paycheck in cash. I started to feel buoyed up by this, and by Clearasil girls' stories of success and how fun it would be to move up. Yes, I wanted that, I thought. We're going to hit Ohio next, she said. I was told to pack my bags that night for the road trip and be ready at 8 a.m. the next morning. In the quiet of the motel room that night, I began to finally tune into my own thoughts. Time had been moving so fast, I nearly didn't have a moment to feel, to think. The night before, as I slept, I swore I heard a recording in my sleep. It came from a small stereo placed on the TV stand in front of our beds, and with the voice of a man, a somewhat deep, commanding voice that you would hear in a commercial. My brain was foggy and fried from the day, but I could recall it saying things like, "We do these things for the organization. We give all the glory to Herod. We will sell. We will be successful." I kept batting the thought and the memory of it out of my head. It couldn't be, I told myself. I must be dreaming things in my burned-out, sleepless state. But I noticed with the lack of food and rest, the additional exercise, and all the messages either in sleep or from the Clearasil girl, I definitely felt how easily I could be slipping into a sort of, dare I say it, brainwashing? For the first time that day, I realized I was dirty. I was a little too shaky after the day's physical toll to shower. I was afraid I would twitch, so I decided a bath would be safer. I closed the door and drew the hot water, happy to be alone with my own thoughts and the self that was slowly being dismantled day by day by the Herod organization. Once I got in, I tried to navigate the wetting of my hair, which required closing my eyes, which is a Caesar treasure, and the shampoo rinsing, so the twitches started. And they weren't petite, little, polite twitches. It was a jerking of my limbs so strong that the shampoo bottles flew across the room and my arms banged hard against the walls of the tub. I called out but lost consciousness briefly and twitched uncontrollably. The quota girls must have come back from their party and heard me. They rushed into the bathroom. "What's going on? You need to get out of there," they yelled as their tiny frames heaved and tugged on my arms to pull me out. I emerged into a prickly and thin towel that the Best Western provided and slumped down onto the closed toilet seat. I put my head in my hands as the quota girls hovered around me, forming a trio of tan and perfect legs that were at my eye level. I saw their muscles from walking. I smelled their musk-scent perfume. I smelled Clearasil girl's minty gum and looked up to see her pop a baseball-sized bubble as I entered into that deep ache in my head that seizures always brought, and thought of my brother Dave. I needed to make a phone call. But there was little time to waste. The girls had all left to tell the supervisors about the seizure. Some of them wanted to stay with me, but I begged them for a moment alone to get dressed. As soon as they closed the door, I lunged for the motel landline and dialed 0 for the operator. I said a prayer that Dave would answer. Hello, Dave, I croaked out as a lump in my throat formed and pulsed. "I need you to come get me," I said, and barely got out the name of the location before the girls rushed back in the room and barked, "Chip." "What do you think you're doing?" Chip wailed, his white crest teeth right up in my face. I could smell his sugary soda breath from the quota party. He was likely just about to make out with a cute quota girl who wore a push-up bra. "I just decided I can do something else," I muttered. Clearasil girl, her blonde, smooth hair shinier than ever from a recent shower, popped a bubble and said, "You're just having a challenge day. Remember, we're family now." And I'm going to end there. I got out. That's good. I got out. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sandy. Next up, we have Lori Jean Canady. As an associate professor of English at Lock Haven University, Lori spends much of her time encouraging students to maximize their potential. On and off campus, she is a consummate champion of women's issues, veterans issues, and issues affecting underprivileged youth. She has published an array of scholarly articles and personal essays on poverty in America, community and domestic violence, and women's issues. She has also spoken against sexual assault in the military at West Point. Her memoir, Crave, Sojourn of a Hungry Soul, will be published this November by Etruscan Press. Lori resides in central Pennsylvania with her husband, who is also here tonight, Chico Kennedy, and her 3 children. Let's welcome Lori.
Thank you all so much. pulling this together. I am so honored to be here. And thank you to Barb for getting me in touch with Monique, and to Bill for getting me in touch with Barb. I am really excited to be here. I'm actually going to be reading an excerpt from a memoir that I'm working on now called Wars We've Lost, Wars We've Won. And the title of this piece is Breaking In. And the memoir itself chronicles my time in the Army. It was a time that was fraught with issues concerning sexual harassment and assault. My first brush with this culture of inappropriate and illegal sexual misconduct occurred during my first month of basic training. I was newly 18, and maybe about a month after I got there, one of the sergeants set his sights on me, and we started an inappropriate and illegal relationship. This piece is going to chronicle the breaking in, or the way in which I was conditioned to accept that relationship. But before I start reading, anybody here in the military? All right. Any brother was West. All right, so that'll count. Well, I wanted to give you guys just a little snippet of what it's like to be in the military. And since I'm reading Breaking In and the focus is on marching, I thought we would maybe have a cadence today so you can be inducted into the military just while you're in here. So don't leave out here and tell people you're in the Army, okay? But the way cadences work are, I will say the line and then you will repeat it. So you guys gonna go with me on this one?
Yes.
All right. Okay, so tiny bubbles.
Tiny bubbles
In my wine.
in my wine
Makes me happy.
makes me happy,
Makes me feel fine.
makes me feel fine.
Tiny bubbles. And we're in a bar.
Tiny bubbles
In my beer.
in my beer
Makes me happy.
makes me happy,
Makes me feel cheer.
makes me feel cheer.
You live, you live.
You live, you live,
You left, right, and live.
you left, right, live,
You live, you
you
live.
left, you left.
Now keep it in step.
Now keep it in step.
2 weeks into basic, I lost a toenail of my big toe. It wasn't a momentous or even painful occasion. I pulled off my Army-issue wool socks, peered down at my swollen, raw foot, and realized the nail was gone. I searched under my bunk, on my green wool covers, in the inside of my boot, on the whole of my foot. I searched feverishly for that lost part of me. The reasoning for my frantic search was not readily apparent. It wasn't like I could reattach it or it would be a suitable candidate for burial, but something in me needed to find it, needed to know where it resided, since it, a part of me, no longer elected to live on my body. There was no blood at the assumed site of abscondence, just peach, pliable flesh without nail, an empty bowl of a toe cradling the shape of what was. Luckily for me, I eventually found it in the toe of my sock, perfectly rounded, basic training, manicured, a toenail with no toe. My discovery instructed me on where to look when the second one fell, and it had me watching all my piggies for fear each of my toe helmets would abandon me one day. I only lost a tooth, but that was just the beginning of my foot dilemma, a dilemma that arose all because we marched. From the moment we received BDUs and boots, we marched. If we went to the chow hall, we marched. If we had business at the range, we marched. Even if we were going to sit call, we marched, lockstep, cadence movements, left, right, left, our feet, leather-headed mallets, and the earth, a bass drum, we marched. Our boots against rocks, crunch like corn nuts against teeth. In wet grass, they swished as we slid like skiers. Uphill, they clumped like encyclopedias flung from shelves, and downhill they scraped, gripping road like tires tattooing streets. And when we marched in place, arms swinging, heads locked forward, we were music. Our bodies, instruments, the buildings, cars, and trees, our audience. Drill Sergeant Fuller served as conductor, and the birds, the sun, the clouds were notes written across the sky skin. All that music led me to sit call with foot-crippling emergencies. My baby toe, once dainty and lazy, leaning against its neighbor, grew in size and color until it resembled a stemless cherry. Corns I had chided Mama over whenever she wore sandals invaded my feet. My heels were not immune as golf-sized pus and blood-filled blisters set up shop. When I walked, it felt as if a water balloon were wedged between my heel and my boot. The only relief required popping the blisters and allowing them to drain. But drill sergeant had warned doing that would mean more pain and possible infections that could cost us our feet. Not listening to drill sergeant had landed me in my predicament. He'd instructed all of us soldiers to wear boots at all times, even after we completed work for the day. He warned if we didn't, we'd later regret it, but I, being my hard-headed, know-everything self, pulled off my boots as soon as we were dismissed, put on my tennis shoes, and gave my tired feet some much-needed rest. Those poor darlings paid later, as my boots were broken in during road marches and runs instead of in the comfort of my barracks. For that act of disobedience, I had paid with pus-drenched socks. No amount of moleskin or ointment offered relief, so I walked on the sides of my booted feet rather than place pressure on newly formed corns and balloon blisters. The worst of the petty pain were the road marches that occurred despite the open sores. Parts of my feet vacillated from numbness to raw stinging whenever we were forced to put foot to pavement. Uncertain of how long we had to march and how far we had to travel, our first march had been grueling. We kept a steady pace, but small hills and curves in the road quickly became train tracks I heavily chugged my way up. I cried in my mind as my feet throbbed in my boots, my back ached under the weight of my ruck, and my neck could barely hold the weight of my head and my Kevlar helmet. The first march had seemed like the worst hell a body could endure, until the next day with the second march, and the next day with the third. And the second week of road marches, landmarks I had been happy to reach before because they meant we had completed our journey, became mere mile markers, denoting miles we still had to travel. As we marched, I pondered the importance of feet, the only segments of body when mobilized in constant contact with earth. When I had been naive, light-footedly tramping on each minute of the day, my feet were invisible to me. Only when I tripped down a step or thick skin gave way to concrete, becoming a stubbed toe, did I notice that they were there. But during the marches, my feet were my body, pulsing steps, blood congregating in the outer regions of each toe, threatening to spew with each pound against dirt. During those moments, I thought I should have been nicer to those feet and let them know how much I appreciated them holding me upright even when I fought to be bent. Despite the pain, I never broke ranks, never took seat. Drill sergeant's voice in my ears, screaming, demanding, overshadowed the cries of my gnarled feet. He commanded we march harder, longer, until blisters popped, mended, popped again, then hardened, until corns calloused over, become more armored toe than compromised cherry, until toenails grew back, stronger, more resilient, and never abandoned again, until rigid leather, conceded, fit every curve of heel, softly kissed the tips of toes, cradled the balls of feet, supported arch like the gentle pressing of a mother's thumb. Those first weeks of basic, a similar callousing, fitting, also moved over me. As Dorsey and my relationship moved beyond the talks, beyond the meetings in plain sight, beyond the touches to stolen kisses. As I marched through the knowing, not much had changed from the civilian world to the military one. Men like Dorsey always got what they wanted. Girls, soldiers like me, we marched as we had been ordered.
Thank you, Lori. I couldn't help but look at the parallels between yours and Sandy's. There's selling and walking and marching.
Yes, and she said newbies.
That's great.
Next up, we have Bonnie Friedman. Bonnie is the author of Surrendering Oz, also published by Etruscan Press, which was recently longlisted for the Penn Diamondstein Spielvogel Award for the art of the essay. Vivian is widely anthologized, and her writing includes Writing Past Dark, Envy, Fear, Distraction, and Other Dilemmas in the Writer's Life. She is also the author of The Thief of Happiness, the story of an extraordinary psychotherapy. And Surrendering Oz was named a finalist for the 2015 Firecracker Award by the Council on Literary Magazines and Presses. Her work has appeared in the Best American Movie Writing, the Best Buddhist Writing, the Best Writing on Writing, the Best Spiritual Writing, and the Best of O, the Oprah Magazine. She teaches creative writing at the University of North Texas and divides her time between Brooklyn and Denton, Texas. Let's welcome Bonnie.
Thank you so much for organizing this. Can people hear me? Does this sound good? Is this good? Okay. Luckily, I remembered my glasses. I have this fantasy always, like I'll just stand here and not be able to read the words, but okay. So this is from an essay called How I Learned to Think. In the years before I discovered how to think, I was lucky enough to have two best friends. They lived in opposite directions, and every day at 3 p.m. outside Junior High School 141 in the Bronx, we stood on a corner and they sang to me, "Walk my way." No, walk my way. I always chose to walk with Stacy, who was mean, rather than Emily, who was understanding. Still, I would toss imploring looks over my shoulder at Emily as I vanished down the street, as if to say, "I adore you. You can see I'm helpless, can't you? Stacy's an ogre. I have no choice in this, and you are my absolute favorite." And Emily was. She was a passionate, windswept, science-besotted only child, always in the grips of a cold, and with hot pink crumpled tissues tumbling out the sleeves of her sweaters, and innumerable missed days at school. Our emblem was Nostradamus's prophesying head, severed head, lurching across a laboratory floor. We'd seen it on Creature Feature one Friday night when the rest of the world was asleep. First, we turned off the bedroom lights and held aloft lit wands of sparklers, a seething fountain of stars and asterisks scorching into our gaze an instant before they wove into the air our names, and then, after a further spewing, blinding moment, divined the names of our husbands, the cities we'd visit, the artistic or scientific works we'd accomplish, the lullabing incandescent skirts we'd wear someday, before the guttering nub scorched our fingertips. After that, we'd eaten string cheese we frayed with our fingers, a sophisticated, delectable gourmet food, a braid of caraway seeds and tangy fat, and watched, glaze-eyed, from our beds as across the rough-hewn Gothic lair came Nostradamus's chopped-off head, still alive, jolting forward on its stump of neck, ranting its visions of the future. "Nostradamus's head," we murmured to each other after that, and burst out laughing to ward off our horror of that unvanquished skull. In those days, it was unknown what would become of us. Women intellectuals still had something of the mutant and pitiful about them. Madame Curie, sickened by radium. She's in the library, a howl of horror rising out of It's a Wonderful Life. Emily and I were bookish girls. She even more than I, because she could indulge her passions, having no siblings and a bedroom of her own in which to pile her ever-increasing volumes. She stayed up however late she pleased. As long as she was physically in bed by 10 p.m., her mother didn't monitor. The door to her room was solid oak. Emily read novels to her heart's content under her black light blanket. At last, losing the train of the story, she turned off the overhead and flicked a switch on a midnight bulb, and her blanket pulsed with phosphorescent hot pink lines, corals and carbuncles and exploded fingertips, the insignia of the maze of existence itself somehow, a labyrinth, burning the dark. No such decoration in my own bedroom, which I shared with my sister. I taped up only the earth from space, a circle isolated far off in a sea of black. It had been given away at school. Anything else was mockable, likely to inspire my older siblings' ridicule. I played no records of my own, hung no art of my own, certainly lit no incense of my own, all of which Emily did, without a second thought. It was as if instead of my being merely a Bronx daughter of a newly middle-class family, I was some orphan ward beholden. I returned to Emily, still sealed, the album of hair she'd given me as a birthday gift. with its acid green and sickly lemon color fields clashing behind a young man's backlit luminous fro. We played Emily's copy of that record over and over in her bedroom. LBJ, IRT, USA, LSD. The chorus dreamily harmonized, but my family's stereo sat in our living room. I couldn't possibly enjoy listening to those songs in my own house. Wasn't that obvious to Emily? And yet I craved what seemed her daring verve. We both fell in love with Tony Curtis in The Great Race, but she bought a chunky, toppling paperback that listed every picture he was in, and she spent her final year of junior high watching each and every one, even if it came on at 3:30 or 4 a.m. She cranked her round, neon orange, wind-up alarm that exploded with a firehouse jangle, and then set a check mark beside each movie once it was seen. In contrast, my own passion remained flat, static, hidden within me like a wick engulfed in paraffin. She and I both prized self-forgetfulness, but only she pursued it. And I found that aggravatingly admirable. She did the thing. She did it, whatever anyone might think. Whereas Stacy, in contrast, was worldly. She never dismissed what others might think. By success, she meant precisely what most people meant. She was an impeccably groomed, ambitious, pragmatic figure sweeping down the street in a long coat that gave her the silhouette of a queen on a chess set. I was drawn to her because she too was a girl of imagination, a girl ablaze, although her focus was altogether different. She folded and stapled pretend bank books and induced me to invest my allowance dollars with her. And she took lessons riding English style on horses in Harrison, New York, her hips hoisted aloft as the horse loped, her spine straight as our teacher's wooden pointer. Her father was a corporate lawyer, and it was assumed that she, being the eldest and clever, would triumph in life as well. He drove a low white Jag like the runabout on the Monopoly set, and they summered on Fire Island, where she wore low-slung bell-bottoms streaked with bleach, and her mother shopped for clothes only at boutiques. Are skinny jeans in Riverdale? Stacy asked the last time we spoke. She'd finally moved to Harrison after years of riding lessons there and now owned a horse, and planted an herb garden and had a live-in maid. A live-in maid, Bonnie, she repeated when my response was insufficient. Her father had even made a postcard of their sumptuous Tudor house, which she'd shown me the last time I visited. The postcard was 1950s sepia-toned with a scalloped edge, a campy artifact whose jolly facade and cool irony impressed me. And then she called with her question. She had a new set of girlfriends whom I heard laughing in the background. I can't stay on, she imagined, but well, Harrison was ahead of Riverdale fashion-wise, wasn't it? She seemed curious to establish, by phoning me, her last contact in that old outpost, someone oblivious to the looks of things. Skinny-legged jeans, I asked, racking my brain. No, I don't think I've seen anything like that. I thought not, said Stacy, and hung up. I hung up too a moment later. Skinny-legged jeans. Obviously, they were trivial, being mere fashion. And yet, if they were completely trivial, why then were my cheeks blazing? Why did my throat and chest sting? I was lost within myself, and remained so for a decade, unable to draw conclusions about anything, living as if my mind were a door I must hold open for yet more information, as if I came to a conclusion too soon, I would miss the crucial valence of things, that particular nuance that provided the key. Only when I had sufficient information could I determine what things meant. And then I am going to skip ahead. I believed, as many girls do, that the signals that came from inside were frivolous, half-mad, arbitrary, a blinding, burning fountain signifying nothing. I was estranged from myself, a kind of split-off Nostradamus head, lurching my way forward in life without benefit of internal and often bodily signals. And then I was asked to teach, so this is jumping way ahead. I was a second-year student at the Iowa Writers' Workshop and was assigned a literature class. It was August, sweltering. I stood before my first ever session in the turquoise, scratchy polyester frill dress in which I'd attended my sister's wedding. A pockmarked Smirking boy in the furthest row tilted back on the hind legs of his chair and clicked his pen. A girl in the first row with blonde, shellacked, orange juice can curls peered at me, a blank notebook open on her desk. I was teaching Macbeth. I'd reread Macbeth. Macbeth is a man at war with his own conscience, I suddenly announced to my students and to myself. There's no feeling safe for him. Not knowing how to teach, I had anxiously abandoned my notes and began to lecture, to conjure. Knives floating in the air, bloody hands that choked the throat of their own mistress, a ghost sitting silently at a party, a voice announcing Macbeth hath murdered sleep. Why, this is just the Bronx, I exclaimed, glimpsing it now for the first time. It was where I'd grown up. It was people disclaiming the meaning of their actions constantly. It was the language of your inner reality divorced from what you were willing to acknowledge. I recalled my sister pinching my cheeks so hard between pincer-like fingers that my skin throbbed for half an hour afterwards, even as she smiled the whole time in my face, and I convinced myself that this was love. And my mother fretting over Anita's fleshiness with a fascinated concern that seemed to have a knife blade hidden inside it. Shakespeare's play was all about the disparity between the felt truth and the one publicly enacted. I heard my own voice say, it was the refused truth of things exploded outward. It was self-estrangement enacted on the world. It was another way of being a doofus. Of course the witches offer temptations. The world will do that. It will offer lots of glimmering rewards if only you will ignore what you know is true. The boy clicked his pen, but less. The girl had taken a note or two, nodding slowly. Walking uphill on Jefferson Street after class, I thought, so, in teaching literature, how you register the emotional valences matters. You can't afford to be comatose. The institution, the university, values the felt sense of things. Has to. There's no teaching English without it. You're beating a dead horse, complained some students next class, those who could see nothing in rereading. You think this horse is dead? It's panting, it's sweating, it's laid out before you, but its heart is pounding. You think I'm beating it? Stories, I realized, were like McDonald's wrappers to many of these students, to be emptied and tossed. And I could show them otherwise. I could show them lines to read between, with incandescent meanings clustered there and sunken compartments in which spirits lay. For the first time in my entire life, I knew something. After that, I couldn't help but become more attuned to my own internal signals. Was this the beginning of adulthood? The signals finally making sense? Because the pangs of hope, the jolts of envy, the stinging rasp when mocked, now instead of seeming the nonsensical knocks and pings of life's engine, they ripped out a pattern of obvious significance. In November, my students read The Metamorphoses, and walking along the deep green corridor after my class, it occurred to me that Nostradamus was an incarnation of the sacred poet Orpheus. My class had just read that the poet's chopped off head, floating down the river after he is slain, retains its mystic power. His tongue, lifeless, still murmured sorrow, and the banks gave sorrowing reply, just like the physician astrologer who continued to prophesy. So, a song is lodged in the body itself. I'd acted as if my own body were in fact a McDonald's wrapper, useful just to keep me intact. I'd always assumed that the creature feature prophet was a warning image of the hyper-developed mind, as if to be an intellectual, and especially a female intellectual, meant having to forswear the ordinary fulfillment. Children's sensuality, a normal home life, I thought women had to choose. Now I saw the prophet as someone who traveled between the physical and the metaphysical, which were not unrelated, as I'd assumed. They might even be in communion, might even sometimes be the same. The body. Might the body itself actually be a Geiger counter of sorts, helping you to find where the treasure was buried, helping you to understand what things meant? Still, despite these glimmers of awareness, it was a hard time, the first year I taught. My internal signals kept bringing me into conflict with those I loved. No wonder I hadn't wanted to read them. Now I had to confront the friends who intimidated me, or at least my attraction to them. And I had to confront as well my tendency to put myself second, my assumption I didn't need to be seen. I'd been wrong about that. Another mistake. I did need to be seen. I didn't want a curtained life. Thank you.
when we come back, we'll hear from Elena Gorakova, who will be reading from Russian Tattoo, and later Helen Phillips. Okay, and please stick around to meet with the authors. And also, I have here, sorry, I got it. Taylor Ropas is our New York City Reader Scout. And so she is helping to curate the series. If there's any authors that you would like to pitch to her, or if you want to pitch yourself, please come and meet with Taylor. Okay, we'll take a quick 5-minute break. So I'm excited to introduce this very next author, Elena Gorakova. And Elena grew up in Leningrad, Russia, and at the age of 24, she came to the U.S. with only a 20-kilogram suitcase to start a new life. She is the author of 2 memoirs published by Simon & Schuster, A Mountain of Crumbs and Russian Tattoo, her latest. She has a doctorate in language education and currently lives and teaches in New Jersey. Her work has appeared in the New York Times, the Daily Telegraph, and BBC Radio, and in a number of literary magazines. I'm very pleased to welcome Elena.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm thrilled to be here. It's a very fitting place for an ex-Soviet. I'll read from my second memoir, Russian Tattoo, which picks up where the first one left off. The first memoir, A Mountain of Crumbs, was about growing up in Soviet Russia, and the story there ended with a scene in Leningrad airport.
I'm just going to lift it so you can hear.
Thank you, Kate. It ended in Leningrad airport, where the protagonist said goodbye to her family and friends before she left for America. But of course one can argue that this is where the story began. So I've written a second memoir, Russian Tattoo, which is a story of a clueless immigrant from Soviet Russia in America, a story of a stranger in a strange land. People often ask me, what were your expectations before you came here, and how were they different? How was the reality different from your expectations? The truth is, I had very few expectations because there was no information whatsoever available in the Soviet Union about the West. So everything here that I experienced in the first few months was unexpected and unknown. I didn't know how to get on a bus, for example, because where I lived in New Jersey, you had to flag them down. And I was just standing at a bus stop waiting for buses to stop, and they were speeding past me. And I had to think that something was wrong with me, that those bus drivers could see, that made them step on the gas rather than the brake. I didn't know how to eat a hamburger because I had never seen one. I promptly failed my GRE exam because of the ABCDs, multiple choice test, that I had never seen before. And I couldn't buy a pair of shoes in a shoe store because there were too many of them and I couldn't make a choice. So what I'm going to read is just an excerpt in a shoe store. It's all you need to know is there are 2 people involved. Millie is my new mother-in-law. I married an American. That's how I got out of the country. And Robert is my new husband, and I have been in the country for a week or 2. Millie is a psychotherapist, a profession mysterious to everyone raised on the other side of the Iron Curtain. In a second house that hides behind thick rhododendron bushes, she runs something called the Academy for Experiential Development. I know about rhododendrons from a Fitzgerald novel, but I've never seen the word experiential before. So I thought that the sign said experimental development. It makes me wonder, as I look across the lawn trying to peer through the thicket of branches, what kind of psychological experiments Millie carries out there on her patients. I could ask Robert about the experiments, but I don't want to sound more clueless than I must already seem. I don't want to pester him with questions about psychotherapy, in addition to questions about everything else that he has to explain to me. Back home, we had physical therapists and medical therapists to deal with various malfunctions of the body, but our psyches, the products of our bright future and heroic past, were all supposed to be uniform and healthy. When they were not, we called our friends and sat in their kitchens until the blackness behind the windows became diluted with the first rays of gray dawn. We talked about love and parents, drinking acidic wine and exchanging homegrown advice not based on any theories, especially Freud's, whose books were safely locked away in secret vaults of the Central Library. With her professional power to analyze the human mind, Millie has quickly figured out that I need a new pair of shoes. The only pair I brought with me, the best shoes I've ever owned, are Hungarian and made of real leather. They have black laces in the front and thick rubber soles, perfect for April in Leningrad, when the snow turns into dirty porridge and walking becomes wading. But now it is August in Princeton, and with the sun melting the asphalt behind the window, they look out of place. So on the third day after our arrival at her house, Millie takes me to a shoe store. Alarmingly, it is full of shoes. Loafers, espadrilles, ballerina slippers, pumps, clogs, flip-flop sandals in colors that bring to mind Matisse paintings hanging at the Hermitage, with heels skinny and solid, high and low, and with no heels at all, are perched on gleaming plastic stands that radiate from the center of the room for as far as my eyes can see. "What do you like?" Millie asks and smiles from above her glasses. As she patiently waits, pretending to examine a pair of pumps with stiletto heels no one could possibly walk on, I realize she wants me to make a choice. My heart sinks. I desperately look around, and a saleswoman promptly sidles up to us. "How may I help you?" she asks in a sickening voice that makes my stomach queasy. They are both looking at me now, waiting for an answer, expecting me to choose one perfect drop in a glittering ocean of footwear. They wait and wait as the ocean rises to my nostrils and threatens to drown me. I take a deep breath as if it were my last. What can I possibly say to them? That Leningrad shoe stores had two models on the floor, both made from rubberized plastic that mangles feet, both produced by the Bolshevik woman factory in Minsk. That I have no idea how much any of these shoes cost and how their prices correlate with my new mother-in-law's budget. That I don't even know what American shoe size I wear. After what seems like an hour of silence, Millie says something to the saleswoman, who vanishes and then reappears holding a hefty metal gauge with end pieces that look like teeth. The word torture rises to the surface of my mind and freezes there. The woman motions for me to take off my Hungarian shoes and step onto the cold surface of her metal instrument. I cringe as I unlace, bearing my hot, sweaty foot. The teeth lurch forward, then stop. 7.5, says the woman and grins. Back home, I was size 36, which makes me think of my sister's joke that everything is bigger in the USSR, that the Soviet Union proudly announced to the world that it produced the largest microchip and the tallest dwarf. I see Millie holding a pair of sandals, a half-inch sole with an elegant band across the instep that wrap perfectly around my feet. The saleswoman curls her lips in a smile and nods her head in satisfaction, as if she was the one who cobbled those sandals together and made them fit. "Why don't you wear them out of the store?" suggests Millie, a question I don't understand. Wear them out? They're brand new, American, leather, perfectly fitting sandals that have to be revered. How can I wear them out? How can I trivialize a pair of shoes that are going to replace my Hungarian wonders. These are shoes that have to be celebrated, tried on in front of a mirror at home, admired and exalted before I can slip my feet into their perfect straps and announce them to the world. No, let's take them with us, I say, putting back on my old shoes, which suddenly begin to pinch. I can't see the saleswoman's face, but I'm sure she's been used. As Millie pays, I glance in the mirror, conveniently attached to one of the shoe displays. What I see is sorrowful and depressing. My previously glamorous Hungarian shoes have instantly lost their luster. The words Bolshevik woman might as well be scrawled all over their surface. I hobble out of the store with the boxed sandals in my hands, Millie trotting behind me, probably questioning her son's sanity as I'm questioning my own. Why, despite all logical reasons, couldn't I bring myself to take the new sandals out of the box and wear them, as people here obviously do, as I should have done if I ever want to learn to fit in? Why am I so stubborn, so foolish, so unable to conform? Why am I so utterly un-American? My old shoes pull on my feet like lead weights as I walk out into the foreign heat, doubting my whole future in this glimmering land of glut.
Thank you, Elena. Finally, we have our final reader for tonight, Helen Phillips. Her novel, The Beautiful Bureaucrat, is forthcoming from Henry Holt in August, and her short story collection, Some Possible Solutions, will follow the following year. She is the author of the intergenre book, And Yet They Were Happy, and the children's adventure novel, Here Where the Sunbeams Are Green. She has received a Rana Jaffe Foundation Writers Award, the Italo Calvino Prize in Fabulous Fiction, the Iowa Review Nonfiction Award, the Diagram Innovative Fiction Award, and the Meridian Editors Prize. Her work has been featured in 10 House and on NPR Selected Shorts. She is a professor at Brooklyn College and lives in Brooklyn with her husband, who is also here to support her tonight. And she is an artist he was an artist at Adam Douglas Thompson, and their 2 young children. She is at work on a book of nonfiction. Let's welcome Helen.
I'm primarily a fiction writer, so it's very exciting for me to be, and nerve-wracking for me to be sharing nonfiction with you guys. But I feel like I've stepped into 4 different fascinating worlds just now. I feel like I'm in such incredible company. It's such an honor to be here. So yes, I don't read nonfiction, I don't share nonfiction, and now I'm about to do that, so here goes. This piece is called Life Care Center. Is the sound good?
Yes.
Across the hall from the room where my sister may or may not be dying, there is a woman who moans, "Help," all day long. Should we help her? I eventually ask my parents. Help who? My father says. The woman who keeps saying, "Help," my husband says. No, she doesn't need any help, my mother says. What lovely sunflowers, I say. What lovely orchids. How kind. Have you sanitized your hands? My mother says you have to sanitize your hands. Orchids and sunflowers, I say. They look surprisingly good together, don't they? At first, we too wanted to help the woman who says help, my father says, but the nurses told us she says it all day long. You know, they're sort of perfect opposites, orchids and sunflowers, I say. Are you guys hungry, my father says? There are chocolates over there. Did you have anything on the plane, my mother says. Isn't it hard to believe you woke up in Brooklyn this morning and now you're here in Colorado, my father says. Hey, she smiled, my husband says. Look, she's smiling. Oh, wow, my father says. Great, wow, look at that. Hi there, girl, I say. Smiley, smiley girl, my mother says. You're smiling because you know your little sister and her husband flew all the way across this great big country to visit you, aren't you, girly girl? You had us scared, you know that, I say. Thank you for smiling, precious, my mother says. On the TV, the barn-raising scene in the musical 7 Brides for 7 Brothers. 6 brothers in their bright shirts dance on a sawhorse. My father and my husband crank my sister's hospital bed up to the full upright position. A confession. I have never looked into my sister's eyes and seen there anything that resembled recognition. Sometimes when we were children, I would accidentally call her by the dog's name. Hush, Freckles, I might say when she moaned, before quickly correcting myself, hoping my parents hadn't heard. In bed, the smiley girl smiles. In the newly opened cafe across the highway from the Life Care Center, there are 13 varieties of dessert on the other side of the glass case. Rhubarb bread, pudding, peach pie, apple pie, chocolate cake, carrot cake, cinnamon rolls, chocolate chip cookies, oatmeal raisin cookies, cranberry scones, lemon bars, almond croissants, chocolate cupcakes. Everything baked on the premises, including the bread. Awed, genuinely awed, we ask the owner, how do you do it all? She does it single-handedly. She has red hair and big yellow teeth. She says, well, if you want to know how I do it is, for, say, the pie, I would make a bunch of pastry dough and then freeze it and save it for when I needed to make a new pie. Like today, I made 18 pie crusts. Or if you're wondering about the scones, what I do is I make a huge batch of scone batter and then save it in the fridge. And then when I want fresh scones, well, all I do is pull some out and throw in walnuts or what have you. I make 10 batches of, say, chocolate chip cookie dough and shape it into balls and freeze them. And then every morning I just throw a few on a cookie sheet so we have fresh baked cookies. Basically, I just rotate. Like this morning, I made 18 pie crusts. It's all about rotating. Almond ganache can keep for weeks. By the time she finishes explaining everything, we have finished our mushroom soup and our bread. Already we are imagining ourselves standing up, walking to the door, stepping out into the parking lot of the strip mall, getting into the car, going back across the highway, returning to the person who has not eaten anything for 16 days. Already we are nauseous. The owner's teeth are so yellow. As we leave, she forces us to sample her lemon bar. I sliced it into 4 pieces, 1 for each of you. What do you think of that? What do you think of my lemon bar? The tang flips around in our hot mouths, burned from the mushroom soup. After lunch, the old people are lined up in the hallway of the Life Care Center. They all sit there in their wheelchairs, baggy around the crotches due to diapers. Some of them stand out. A woman who is bald but for 100 white hairs. A man whose skin is so pale he looks dead. I can't believe they let a dead man sit there alongside the others. A woman strapped to her wheelchair with 12 bright orange straps. A woman with an eager smile who says to everyone walking by, "Did you bring it today? Did you bring it?" A man who is able to ask us, "How is she doing?" And to whom we are able to reply, "She is finally eating again." Yet these distinctions between the old, perhaps they are mostly imagined. In truth, they are lined up there in the hallway like one enormous, indistinguishable beast that smells of urine and overcooked fish. Passing them is like passing down a gauntlet. We cannot decide if it is better to avert our eyes or to smile. We cannot tell if they are staring at or through us. Do they know that they are old and that they stink? It's like something from a fairy tale, once upon a time in the castle of the ancient ones. At least this is what we try to tell ourselves. My sister does not exactly belong here. She is 5 decades younger than the others who live in the rooms lining this hall. Yet she is retarded enough to fit in. Please don't use that word, please don't even think it. Yet she is handicapped, disabled, crippled enough to fit in. Yet she is blank enough to fit in. Like them, she cannot walk, cannot feed herself, wears diapers, sickens easily, is prone to fatal pneumonia. Because she cannot talk, we have nothing to await aside from her smiles. This can breed boredom, impatience. Yet she is magical enough to fit in, yet she is mystical enough to fit in, a beautiful anomaly in the stinking castle of the ancient ones. Before she was quarantined in her room, the old folks fawned over her, or so the nurses tell us. No parent should have to prepare for the death of a child. Once upon a time, a beautiful young woman married a handsome young man. They had a splendid baby girl, but the baby was cursed. Why was the baby cursed? Let's say the beautiful young woman had offended someone. But that's not fair. Was there any good reason for the baby to be cursed? Come on, work with me here. I'm just trying to tell a fairy tale. Here's what happened. The baby girl was born normal, perfect, precious, flawless, adorable, charming, cute, cuddly, lovely, sweet, dear, darling, delightful, beautiful, winsome Bonnie. But just before her first birthday, she forgot the few words she had learned. Her legs went limp, her eyes crossed, her hands wrung, her tongue lolled. It was difficult to get excited about the offspring that followed. A medical explanation, please? Eventually, the girl was diagnosed with Rett syndrome. Ray's syndrome? No, Rett syndrome. Tourette syndrome? No, Rett syndrome. Like Rhett Butler? Sure, minus the H. I've had Rett syndrome my whole life. So, what is it? A neurological disorder occurring in 1 in 20,000 live female births. Only girls? They're born completely normal, then stop progressing. Life expectancy? Unknown. Likely cause of death? Pneumonia, compromised lung function due to scoliosis and difficulty swallowing. I'm sorry, that's where I'm going to end. Sweet note to end on. I feel like I need to read a joyous haiku now, but that's life.
Thank you, Holland. Let's give all of our ladies a round of applause. Again, we host the reading series here every second Wednesday of the month. Please join us July 8th for Noir Night. We have a group from Jersey Shore coming out to read. And I hope you stick around to get to know some of the writers. Some of them do have books here. And hope to see you here again. Thank you.